And now to Lebanon, as that country's election frenzy cools down, the country has awoken to a new chapter in its dizzying political history. After Sunday's election results, shifts in the balance of power in the country's 128-seat parliament and its fragile sectarian power-sharing system have occurred. Lawmakers who for many decades were constant variables in Lebanon's political equation were unseated. Unfamiliar faces inspired by the country's 2019 uprising were elected and might now breathe a new life into an often comatose political system. The powerful Iran-backed Shia party Hezbollah also suffered losses, but the political allies that helped it maintain a parliamentary majority suffered major blows, both from traditional rival political parties and a new anti-establishment opposition. And global affairs analyst Calvin Dack joins me from Washington via Skype to discuss this. Good to have you join us, Calvin Dack.
Good to be here.
Let's start with this election. This is the first election since the uprising in 2019. When you look at the dynamics of this election, we will get to all of the complex situations soon, but I just want to ask you if you think that this particular election has succeeded in breathing new life into politics in Lebanon.
Well, I think it may be a little too early to say that it's really breathed new life, but I think what we can definitely say is that, this is the first time that the Lebanese people have been able to express how they feel at the ballot box since 2019, and the fact that they voted against the ruling class elite is a sign of their frustration and a sign that they want change. Now, there's a lot that happens before that change takes place, or that we really see this new breath, but it was definitely an expression of the people that they wanted to change. So in that sense, yes.
Let's talk about Hezbollah. The party suffered losses. It used to have about 71 seats. Now it's down to 62, and 65 is needed for a majority in parliament, but the party is still the major bloc in parliament. Does this sort of shift the balance of power in terms of the influence of Hezbollah in politics in Lebanon?
Well, I think because Hezbollah didn't lose seats itself, but lost seats of those allied with them, so they lost the majority. In that sense, that things will be different, but I don't think on the ground the influence of Hezbollah is going to change. What is going to change is that now Hezbollah is going to have to do something that it hasn't had to really do as much since they took power, and that is compromise, and that is make what they are planning, projecting their vision for Lebanon more palatable to others, to form a governing coalition. So in that sense, Hezbollah is going to have to be more flexible and compromising than it's had to be in recent years.
You're right about Hezbollah not losing seats, but its key Christian ally, I think that's the patriotic movement, did lose seats. And that's some sort of dent for Hezbollah, or setback rather for Hezbollah, because the Christian party that has not won 13 seats or gained 13 seats is the U.S. and Saudi-backed party, which has a very sour relationship with Hezbollah. And that's why I was asking you about the balance of power, whether it works for Hezbollah or not.
Well, I think there are two things about that. One is they're going to have to compromise more. And two, it's really going to further demarcate the contrast that you do have not only independents who were elected, that now the Hezbollah and Christian parties have to decide they're going to work with them, but we have two opposing forces in Lebanon that, is this going to create more gridlock? Is this going to create more division at a time when that's the opposite of what they need? So I think the situation will be influential in Lebanese politics. It'll be interesting to see how Hezbollah will work with the new Saudi US-backed Christian parties.
And that's what the challenge is, the complexities, because Lebanon is a semi-democracy. It has a very complex sectarian government where the president has to be a Maronite Christian, the prime minister has to be a Sunni Muslim, and the head of parliament, which is the speaker, has to be a Shia Muslim. And right now, it doesn't seem like they have enough in parliament to form that kind of government. Do you see a deadlock in terms of what decisions and reforms that are needed in Lebanon?
Yes, I think the potential for a deadlock is high. I think, as you were just describing, the complex electoral parliamentary system in Lebanon, that highlights why the win of these independents was so significant. If you look at the numbers, I think it's around 10%. Most people would say, well, is that really significant? Considering how complex the voting system is in Lebanon, it is very significant. But now let's move back. When we think about like the gridlock and the deadlock potentially without having an outright governing coalition run by Hezbollah, this is exactly the opposite of what's needed, because all of these complexities and things that we've just been discussing are happening against the backdrop of the worst economic crisis in, I think, over a century. You've got in high inflation, high unemployment. So there needs to be solutions and a vision to get out of this so that they can get help from the IMF and others yesterday. And now we're in a situation where potentially even more gridlock because of the political divisions. So I think deadlock is not only probable, but it is the thing that the Lebanese people need the least in these very dire economic times.
And when you talk about the Lebanese people, I mean, the turnout was almost as just like that of 2018 elections, but not as high as expected. It shows some level of discontent with the politics in that country. What do you think is next for Lebanon in terms of stability and reforms?
Well, I hope that the winning parties can come to compromise and agreement so that this political gridlock and deadlock does not stop the economic recovery and, the election of the president in October and other key milestones that the Lebanese people need. However, when we think about like the voting participation, I think one thing that we also saw was that there was a huge discontentment against the elite after 2019, after that horrible explosion in August 2020, and there's a lot of apathy. So I think if you factor that in, that people are wondering why weren't they more votes or substantially more votes, than 2018. I think there's a lot of apathy. I think there are a lot of Lebanese people that wonder if their vote can really change something in a system that is very complex and very hard to really shake up and change.
And that coupled with the fact that the former leaders, Hariri's party, also called for a boycott, and that backfired. Thank you so much for talking to us, Calvin Dark.
Thank you.